So I think you mentioned this kind of last time.
Okay.
But the Jews celebrate their own non-Jesus form of Easter.
Yes.
So what do they do for Easter?
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, in relating to like Easter, like that month, and kind of that Easter month now being referred to as a Paschal month.
Right.
Okay. So for the Jews, it's all about Passover in April.
Right.
So whereas for the Christians, it's about Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus. For the Jews, it's about Passover. And so for them, they're celebrating a Passover meal, what they would refer to as a Seder meal. And in the Seder meal, and we actually have this at our church. So it's not just Jews that celebrate it, but for Jews, they're celebrating a Passover meal, a Seder meal, and they have different items on the table. And it depends on how strict they are wanting to be in regards to the Seder meal. In other words, are they going to be fully strict to just what's there in Scripture, that's what they're going to have there? Or are they going to have other things as well?
The meal is in Scripture?
Yeah, the meal's in Scripture.
Like what you're supposed to eat?
Uh-huh, correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so for the Jews, you would have, again, the Passover lamb is the center point.
Right.
That's the remembering of the lamb that had to be killed. So you take the blood, put it on the doorpost, and that your firstborn son would not die as the angel of death passed over your house. And so you're celebrating Passover, the fact that death did not hit your house, and you're celebrating the fact of that ultimately is what led Israel being allowed to be free, set free from slavery out of Egypt.
So that's what they're celebrating?
They're celebrating freedom.
Freedom.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what their whole Passover is
correct.
about.
It's all about celebrating the fact of that God, through the miraculous, was able to deliver them out of Egypt.
So why do we do it?
People. So for Christians,
yeah.
So we look at.
Is it not illegal for us to do or anti-Jesus?
Yeah, no. So actually, in the early church, they would have continued having Passover meals.
Okay, so that's if Jesus did it, then I guess we could do it.
Yeah, and because remember, all the early Christians were Jews initially,
right?
Okay, and so Paul and other writers don't forbid the keeping of Passover, for example, or even other festivals
by Christians.
They just don't want it to be forced upon them. So if you want to keep Passover, keep Passover. If you don't, you don't. And so for Christians, we look at it as also celebrating the fact that, yes, God delivered his people out of Egypt. That's awesome. But we also make a connection with Jesus, who Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5 is actually the Passover lamb.
Okay.
And so for us as Christians, we look at all of that and we make that connection. We see the symbols as how it connects to Jesus and his suffering as the Passover lamb.
It seems like the Jews connect more stuff to food than we do.
Yeah, I mean that's fair because they have a lot more festivals and feasts than we do. Yeah, that's a big part of their religion.
Are we going to do one at church?
Yes, we are.
All right.
Yep. So we have one April 22nd this year.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, lamb is delicious.
Agreed.
So they do. So how? Oh wait. How come why is their thing in April and ours is yesterday?
Yeah, because theirs
or last week.
Yeah, yesterday. Yeah, because they're sticking with the Jewish calendar.
Okay.
So this is where it falls on the Jewish calendar, which is different than the calendar we use.
Is there supposed to be a connection between Jew freedom and Jesus coming back to life?
What do you mean?
Like Jesus did the Last Supper before he did all of his stuff.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So is there supposed to be a connection between the two festivals?
Yeah, so the connection is that, whereas Jews celebrate Passover every year, remembering God delivering them out of Egypt, we celebrate Easter remembering the Passover lamb who delivered us out of our own slavery, which was a slavery to sin.
Okay.
And so as Jews are celebrating freedom from being enslaved in Egypt, we're celebrating the fact that Jesus has overcome the power of sin and death, and that we are no longer enslaved by those things anymore.
Jesus always had everything he did was related to something that Jews do.
Yes. Well, and it's what's interesting, because remember, Jesus is a Jew, obviously, but then in Hebrews, it speaks about the fact that that which we see in the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, those are copies and shadows of the things that are going to be fulfilled in the Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why
in
Jesus, we see the fulfillment of those things that are merely copies and shadows, symbols that are pointing to Jesus that are there in the Old Testament.